On June 9th, Anthropic released what they call their most capable AI model ever, that is the Claude Fable 5. 3 days later, the US government banned it. Not suspended, but really banned it. The export controls applied immediately after Amazon researchers found a method of bypassing its safety filters that caused the model to identify software vulnerabilities and, in one case, produce exploit code. The government acted within hours of seeing the report, and for 18 days, Fable 5 was offline for everyone outside the US. Anthropic spent that time working with the government and Amazon to build an improved safety classifier that challenges the findings and negotiate the model back. On June 30th, the export controls were lifted. Fable 5 came back on July 1st, and then subscribers found out there was a catch. The free access window, which was supposed to be 2 weeks, was now just 6 days at half your usage limits, ending on July 7th. The Reddit threaders were not kind at all on this news, and if you're watching this after July 7th, the free window is almost over, but Fable 5 still exists, still works, and Anthropic has said clearly they plan to restore it to standard subscription plan as soon as the capacity allows. So this video is worth your time regardless of which side of the date you are on, because the use cases I am going to show you apply whenever you have access, now or even later. So let's start by saying what is Fable 5 actually. So let me give you the honest version rather than the marketing version. Fable 5 is the Mythos-class model, a tier above Opus, which was previously Anthropic's most powerful widely available model. And it is built for long, complex multi-step work, not a quick answer kind of a model, not short emails. It's mostly for the multi-day autonomous task where earlier models would lose the thread, make mistakes midway through, and require constant correction. Three things make it technically different from what came before. It has a 1 million token context window as standard and not as an upgrade, which is it's basically a default. It can write its own tests to verify its own work, and it uses vision to check outputs against the original goal. So if you can ask to rebuild a layout from a screenshot, it can actually look at it, what it produced, and compare it to what you gave it. So the benchmarks show it at the top of nearly every category, but benchmarks are not what matters for this video. What matters for BI developers or data analysts is a very specific question. Where does something that can hold a multi or a million token of context and check its own work actually change how you do your job? One thing worth knowing: when Fable 5 hits a cybersecurity or a biology query, it automatically routes that to Opus 4.8 instead. So you are not charged Fable prices for the rerouted request, and this happens in less than 5% of sessions, and most people never encounter it. So let me be completely clear about the access situation because it is genuinely confusing right now. If you are on a Claude Pro Max team or any enterprise plan, Fable 5 was included up to 50% of your weekly usage limits through July 7th. After that date, it moves to the usage credits, a separate metered billing layer on top of your subscription at $10 per million input tokens and $50 per million output tokens. So that is really roughly 3 times what Sonnet cost and twice what Opus cost per token. So is it worth paying for? For your average daily BI workflow, I suppose no. Sonnet 5 and Opus 4.8 handles the majority of what BI developers need, whereas Fable 5 earns that cost on a more complex, longest running, most context heavy tasks. Anthropic has said explicitly that the move for usage credit is not permanent. The short windows was a supply problem, not a pricing strategy. For now, treat Fable 5 as a premium add-on you reach for most of your demanding work, not as your everyday model. Here is the insight that changes how you should think about Fable 5 and honestly about any powerful AI model in your workflow. Most people use AI for task execution. They know what they want, they ask for it, they get an output. That works fine for a simple task, and it works less well for the kind of work BI developers do, where the problem is often not that you don't know how to do something, but that you don't know yet fully to understand what the problem is. And Fable 5 is better thought of as a task discovery model. Before you execute a solution, you use it to fully understand the problem, the unknowns, the risk, the hidden constraints, the questions you should answer before you build. The most useful prompt I have seen for this framing is what researchers called a blind spot pass. You tell Fable what you are working on, and you tell it what you don't know, and you ask it to surface what you don't know, and you don't know the don't know. So it's basically the unknown unknowns, the hidden constraints, the questions that would change your approach if you answered them first. For example, I am working on a task, whatever task may be, and I understand the source logic, but I am unfamiliar with the edge cases or the business rule or the data dependency. Do a blind spot test, find my unknown, risks, hidden constraints, and questions that I should answer before we implement. That prompt applied before you start building anything is worth more than any specific task Fable 5 can execute for, and it surfaces what you would have discovered in a week 3 when it would have cost you everything you built in week 1 2. So the first use case is the DAX debugging and explanation, and this is the one I reach for most in my actual Power BI work. You inherit a report with a measure that runs a wrong number, and let's say a 30 lines of nested calculate, all filter, and use relationships stacked on top of each other, and you could trace the logic yourself, or you could paste it into Fable and use a prompt like this. Here is a DAX measure that is returning incorrect results. Explain what it is doing step by step. Identify what the filter context is being modified, and tell me the most likely source of error and why. So what Fable does that earlier model did less well is it reads the intent, not just the syntax. It tells you why the measure was written this way, what the author was probably trying to achieve, and then it tells you where the logic diverges from the intent, and that how a senior developer reads the code. And it's a meaningful leap from this is what the formula does to this is what was meant and where it goes wrong. I made a whole video and filter context and row context, and I will link it in the description box below. Understanding those concepts is what makes this prompt works even better. You will be able to evaluate whether Fable's explanation is correct rather than just accepting it. The second use case is SQL or SQL procedure, stored procedure comprehension at an enterprise scale. So this is where Fable's 1 million token context window changes the whole lot of things here, which includes multiple CTE, joins across 6 table, business logic written by someone who left 3 years ago, and your job is to understand it before you modify it. So with Fable 5, you can paste the entire code, not the chunks, the whole code, and ask it to map the dependencies, identify which CTE is doing what business function, and flag where the assumptions are being made in the joins, and also produce a plain English summary of what this SQL code is actually computing. And earlier models needed chunking pipelines to attempt this, but Fable reads it whole. So this prompt that works here follows a reference and implementation plan approach from good AI workflow practices. So give the Fable a code or a procedure, whatever it is, give it the target state and ask it to identify what needs to be validated before any conversion begins. And that is a blind spot pass applied to SQL work. Here is the code. I need you to migrate from language A to language B. So before you touch the implementation, identify all the business logic assumption, data quality dependency, edge cases in the joins, and questions I should answer about the source systems before we write a single line on a different programming language. The third use case here is the data model documentation. The thing everyone knows they should do, almost nobody does it. And Fable 5 is the first tool that makes it feel like something other than punishment. Feed Fable your Power BI semantic model, such as measure dimension, table schema, relationship structure, and ask it to generate a data dictionary in plain English. What each table represents, what each measure calculates, how the relationship should be understood by a non technical reader. Where Fable goes further than earlier models is you can give it a screenshot of your entire data model diagram and it will use vision to understand the relationship visually, not just from the schema text. So, dense financial or analytical diagrams that would have required manual description now get read directly. A sample prompt could be like, here is my Power BI data model schema and these measures. Generate a data dictionary covering what each table represents in business terms, what each measure calculates in plain English for a non-technical stakeholder, and which relationships are most important to understand when reading dashboards built on this model. The fourth use case I would like to mention here is DBT scaffolding. This one is for the analytics engineers and anyone working with the modern data stack. The pattern following structured scaffolding work in DBT, which is the schema.yaml entries, model description, column documentation, test suggestion, is exactly the category of work Fable handles at high speed and high accuracy. So you give it the SQL transformation and describe the business concept and ask it the to produce the full schema.yaml entry. A sample prompt could be like, here is my DBT SQL model and a description of the business concept. It represents generate the complete schema.yaml entry including model description, column descriptions for each field and appropriate DBT test, not null where applicable, accepted values where there is a controlled vocabulary, and relationship tests where there are foreign key dependencies. The intelligence jump with Fable is in the test suggestion quality. It does not just suggest not null on every column, it reads the business logic and infers which column should have controlled values, which should have reference another model, and which edge cases in the source data should be caught by a singular test. So that level of contextual test generation used to require basically couple of senior engineer judgments. Now it is a starting point you refine from. For the fifth use case, and this one I want to actually show you because it demonstrates how you can use Fable, and something that I think is the most underrated capability for data people specifically. So I'm going to take my own channel analytics data and run a real session with Fable 5. It's not a demo on a fake data. My most actual numbers will be represented here. Let's get into it. Okay, so now you are viewing my Visual Studio Code platform, and I have already selected the workspaces that I'll be loading my project. So this is the workspace that I have currently, and I have also loaded my Fable project, or what you say called the skills markdown file, that tells the Claude to build a YouTube channel analytic dashboard for my channel. So let's get started here. Claude Fable 5 model has started its session. So it has triggered a goal is to understand and build the analytic dashboard for my YouTube channel, and the starting point is unknown. So some of the unknowns that it's trying to understand are the data source, API access, metrics that matter, who views the dashboard, some all these things that I've not so far forwarded it to do. So So the important territory here is to understand if they have if you are using public data API, and it further goes down to ask me a user question. So it did ask me a couple of questions like what decision or need is this dashboard actually for, and I have answered in terms of understanding the growth of the channel. And later on, it again thought for 2 seconds and asked me another asked me another questions asking for if there are any metrics that you want that requires OAuth as a channel owner, or whether it has to be through a CSP export data. So I initially thought let's do an OAuth. So that's what you see as a response. And another question that again came up is how do you want to use this dashboard on day to day? So for purpose of this video, I just asked for a static report, nothing fancy right here. And then later on, another question asked was which growth questions should the report answer? So I've asked to pick all the options that it provided me, so that I didn't want to be specifically asking one particular question. And those were the questions for the sharp focus. And then another question was I asked the Fable to do its own generation of the script. So I have not given anything specific there as well. So now this is where the process really starts. So now you can see it started accessing my working directory content, and then started with a fetch of my YouTube channel, and looking into my videos. So this was more of all the thought process. As you can see, it has multiple layers. It also provides you the steps of what the Fable Claude tool or the model does internally. Couple of unknown Some of the unknowns I mentioned here are your channel has two distinct era, and lumping through together will mislead what works analysis. This is because in 2025 I took a break. I had to concentrate on my work and produce content on YouTube. So that is what it talks about. But now I'm kind of frequently putting out videos. So that's the two distinct eras it mentioned. Second is the statistical noise at the scale. Most of my videos are at around 20 to 400 views. So that is what it specifies. And also it wants to understand if the long and the shorts are not comparable and must be split. And along with that, it talks about the impressions, the CTRs with it, and some of the risk and constraints with respect to OAuth and retention curves lags, because sometimes the data reports of YouTube is a lagging report that you see. So this is quite impressive when you see on the blind pass, because I never really thought that you Fable would take into consideration or look into the two eras that I had. And now you see the implementation path. The goal was to build a Python script, and then some of the key decisions for me to approve as and when it processes the dashboard, and then some of the proposed steps. And what I will not change is that the the Claude gives us an assurity that because this folder has lot of my MP4 files, all the files, video files that I record for the channel, and also some of the risks and approval kit. So I then left the Fable to take ownership of its own. Some of the things that it did highlight. Visual Studio Code did give me alerts on whether Fable has the authority to change any Mac related settings, which is because I use Mac, and I gave no for that, which is really important to know, because whenever you run a AI model, you does not change any of your other files, right? I did change the question here. I didn't want to go over with OAuth of Google. I went and provided some of the data exports from my YouTube channel as a CSV format. So you can see here very well that the CSV pipeline is getting built and tested. No Google Oath Cloud setup needed anymore. So the Fable model took the entire understanding what the given files were, and then it provided the entire dashboard. So the final result is that the dashboard is live with real data. I have verified the total against your export total rows, and the CTR for the period of April to July 4th, because that's when I was very active. That's the period that I started relaunching my entire YouTube in terms of BI and data career. And here it has also provided a story of what works well, what didn't work well, what was the reason it didn't work well. So it gives a pretty good story of what I should focus on. These are the three commonly questions that Fable asked me to look into. Like, I have not asked it to look. So it's more like Fable is discovering these points for me. So it's pretty good model. You can see the dashboard that's been generated. I just asked for a static report and it's in the format of an HTML. I have around this many subscribers. The views have been up by 116%, which is good for the last 28 days. And what's working in this long-term era is also being provided. What's were the top few topics that's driving the channel analytics is also provided. And you can also find that the packaging versus content chart has been specifically shown for me to understand how my content is working in terms of packaging worked. So that gives me an idea of what I have to focus on. Finally, there's a couple of shots related analytics, and then you can see the archives, that is the pre-launching era. Those were also been analyzed. Fable model has been pretty useful. And yeah, that's the final use case I would like to mention. Here is my most verdict as working as a BI developer analyst who uses AI in production workflows. For your everyday BI work, writing a quick DAX measure, answering a stakeholder question, or cleaning up a SQL query, I feel Sonnet 5 is faster and cheaper and gets the job done. But for Fable, it's not your daily driver. So where Fable earns its cost is on your most complex, context-heavy, multi-step task, the kind of work where you would normally have to split across multiple sessions, lose context each time, and spend as much time re-explaining the situation as actually solving the problem. So that is where the 1 million token context window and the ability to check its own work actually change the amount of or the output quality, not just the speed. The insight I want to leave you with is the framing from earlier in this video. Use Fable for task discovery before you use anything else for task execution. Feed it your most complex problem before you start building. Ask it for blind spot pass. Let it surface what you don't know yet. And that step alone, if done well, will save you more time than any specific task the model executes for you. So, if you are a BI developer or a data analyst trying to figure out where AI actually fits in your workflow, I hope this gave you a clear, honest picture rather than another list of impressive demos. I will be attaching the portfolio link that I've saved the codes for. Do drop in the description box. Do drop your comment telling me which of these 5 use cases you are most likely to try first, or if there's any BI task that you're wondering whether Fable 5 could handle. And I read every comment, and the best question becomes the future videos as well. So subscribe for weekly BI and data career content every Wednesday. And next week I have a special episode. I'm coming and sitting down with a senior analytics engineer from Vancouver for an episode of Data Talk with Doers. So make sure you're subscribed for that. So see you on Wednesday.